as a scientist, I've been working for 20 years to become a scientist, and I get offended when I see people doing things which I would just abuse my undergraduates if they did this. So let me just kind of show you some examples of what I consider to be good science and what's bad science. So first of all, we have to ask, what are the important questions? Is the global warming occurring? What's causing global warming? And how reliable are our climate models in making forecasts into the future? So, skeptical claims. So one of the claims we often hear is that there is no warming since 1998. So this is a case study in 2006, Bob Carter had about 1,200-word essay published in the Telegraph in which he said that there's been no warming since 1998. And this statement is perpetuated many times on blogs. So we analysed this. Let's look at the data that we have for this. So the red dots here show monthly mean global temperatures, and the blue line shows the annual mean temperature. And by looking at this, you can see there's no obvious warming over this 10-year period. But look at this. If I put my hand over the left-hand part of this graph, then I could argue, well, look, there is a trend there, right? But of course, that would not be science. It would be fabrication for me to cover up some of the data and claim that that's what's happening. Science is not about selecting data that supports your argument. Science is about looking at all the data and seeing what arguments the data supports. So we have to look at all the data and accept that. So in this case, you look at this and you might ask, well, why did Bob Carter choose 1998? What about 1996? If you look at 1996, well then it looks a little bit more like maybe there is a trend there, but there is certainly a big spike in 1998. 1998 was a very strong El Nino year. But why look at 1996? Why not then look at 1968? When you look at 1968, you can see that there's a much more obvious trend. In fact, if you take the 10-year averages for the last 4 decades, you can clearly see the trend going up. And the important thing here is that these little fluctuations up and down, that's not what's important. The fact that there was a spike in 1998 is irrelevant. The important key fact is that there is this long-term trend, and global warming is about these long-term trends, not the fluctuations. So there are lots of cases where the denialists will use these kind of cherry-picking arguments, where they select a piece of data that supports their particular argument. And as I say, that's not science. Science is about looking at all the data and seeing what hypotheses fit all that data. And I'm not talking about the details of these. There are lots of ones that I can go through. So, I've shown you then the data that shows this warming over the last 4 decades. Maybe there's something else wrong about it. Maybe there's something wrong about our observations. Maybe the instruments are wrong. So this is another one of those arguments. So Anthony Watts, who was a former weather announcer on a radio station, set up surfacestations.org, where the claim is that poorly sited weather stations are what results in those trends that we saw over the last 4 decades. So let's analyze this. So the argument goes like this. The argument is that here is a typical weather station in the United States. That little box in the middle of the screen here, this is a modern electronic automated weather station. And what you will notice is that it's situated next to an asphalt parking lot. And we all know how hot these things get, how particularly hot these things get in the summer months. You also see that it's situated next to exhaust fans, which will produce artificial heat. I'm not actually sure what importance the cell phone tower has. But the claim is that there are lots of sites like this that are substandard states across the United States. There are something like 1,200 weather stations across the United States. And so Anthony Watts and his team of volunteers have been going around documenting whether or not these sites are good sites or not. And they put this information up on their website. It was freely available. And the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration scientists looked at that data and they saw that of the 1,200 sites, they had, Anthony Watts and his group had seen about 70% of those at the time, had checked them, and of those, 70 of them, at least 70 of them, were good sites or best quality sites. So what the NOAA scientists did is they looked at the temperature trends at those 70 sites and compared them with all of them. And what they saw is this graph here. The blue line shows the average temperature trend at those 70 good sites, and the red line shows the average temperature trend at all sites. And you don't have to be colorblind to sort of see that these two graphs are essentially the same as one another. There is no statistical significance difference between those two. So what this shows is that actors will claim that those increases in temperature as a result of badly situated weather stations cannot be true. If the 70 good sites have the same trend as all of the sites, then there can't be any difference, that the bad sites are not making any effect. Of course, actually what's his advantage could be to save a lot of trouble. Scientists knew that this was not going to be a problem because there are lots of ways in which we can measure temperature. We can use satellites, we can use sea surface temperatures, we can use weather balloons. There aren't any asphalt parking lots in the ocean or a kilometre up in the air. All of these different ways of measuring temperatures will not have the same type of error, and they all produce the same kind of trends. And there are also many other different ways that we can look at things which are all consistent with global warming. So all of the data has to be looked at if you're being a scientist. Another claim is that, well, okay, so far then I've established that global warming is occurring, it's not some mistake. So another kind of claim is that it's not global warming is not caused by carbon dioxide, or we can't trust our models. So here's an example of good science. This was work by James Hansen and a team of 5 other scientists that was published in the Journal of Geophysical Research in 1988, in which they claimed that the greenhouse effect caused by carbon dioxide will be causing global warming. So here's the actual figure from that 1988 picture. So I'll explain the details of this in a moment. But what they did is they took a computer model of the Earth's atmosphere and they ran a simulation over a 60-year period. And so from 1987 onwards, this was now a forecast of what would happen. Now, the holy grail of the scientific method is to forecast something before it happens. So we should check then this forecast, so we can see the model agrees with the observations in the past, so what happens in the future, so what happens in the future is this. Now once again, don't be worried by the jumps up and down, the wheeling up and down. What's important is the trend. And what this shows is this model from 20 years ago correctly forecast the temperature increase over the last 20 years. The models that we have now are much better than the models that we had 20 years ago, and scientists are much more confident in our ability to predict what will happen in the future. The other important thing this shows is that there is only one atmosphere that we have. We can't take the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and see what happens, but we can run our models. And one thing that we see is that without the carbon dioxide in those models, we do not see that upward trend. What would happen is that all the forecasts would jiggle up and down. Here, they would not go up into this red box. The fact that the blue line exits the green box and goes into the red box demonstrates that this is caused by carbon dioxide. It cannot be caused by something else. All right, so there's a whole lot of very good real science out there. There's no way that I can cover all of this in just 10 minutes. But the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, 4th Assessment Report from 2007, the working group number 1 focuses on the physical science basis. This shows us the what, the why, and the how of climate change. It's over 1,000 pages, produced by 400 authors from 40 different countries. It cites nearly 6,000 journal articles, peer-reviewed journal articles. It's conservatively written, it's not a whole lot of hyperbole, not a lot of rhetoric in there. It cites evidence both for and against, but overwhelmingly the evidence is that it's happening and we're causing it. So global warming is happening, CO2 emissions are responsible, and really there is no grounds for skepticism anymore. What we're seeing is denialism, and denialism, people who are saying these things, either they do not understand science or they're being deliberately misleading. Denialism is just rhetoric, it is not science.